Hello and welcome to Think Like a Game Designer. I'm your host, Justin Gary. In this podcast, I'll be having conversations with brilliant game designers from across the industry with a goal of finding universal principles that anyone can apply in their creative life. You could find episodes and more at thinklikeagamedesigner.com. In today's episode, I speak with Touko Tahkokallio. He is a self-proclaimed Finnish game designer with an unpronounceable last name, but it's well worth getting past the pronunciation because he has a lot of great insights. He's a professional video game developer who worked over 10 years at Supercell. He was the original game designer for mobile games such as Heyday and Boom Beach, and also the first game lead on Brawl Stars. In 2022, he co-founded a mobile game studio, Stellar Core, which he is the chief creative officer for. Prior to that, he was a theoretical physicist, and we dive into that a little bit. And he is also a great board game designer, probably best known for Eclipse, and is a 2012 Golden Geek Board Game of the Year winner. In this episode, we talk about a lot of really interesting topics and starting a game company, the value of too many projects running at the same time, how to successfully prototype without using any rules or components, and the power of a playful mindset when doing hard work. There's a lot of great insights in here, and I know that you're going to love it, so I'll keep this intro short. And without any further ado, here is Touko Tahkokallio. Hello and welcome. I am here with Touko Tahkokallio. I hope I got that name right. I'm very excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, no, it's been great getting opportunity to talk with more designers that are not from the U.S. and not based where I am usually based, because I'm in Europe for this timeline. And I'm really excited to get to talk to you because you have such an incredibly diverse background through all different aspects of the industry. We've never had a chance to talk before, so I guess maybe just to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience. Maybe kind of give some highlights, and then let's dig into kind of how you got into gaming and design in general.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Touko. I live in Finland, in Europe. So my background in gaming, particularly, has been like board games initially, and then digital games later. And but I didn't start like as my life as a designer per se. I actually pursued first like this another track, like totally different thing about physics, theoretical physics, and I spent like part of my early life as a researcher. But then somehow I like board games just got into my head so much that I started working more and more on those, and that led me to also to work on mobile games. So I work on board games like maybe 10, 15 designs, original designs, and then some expansions. Maybe the most successful one was Eclipse, like the 4X space empire builder game. And but on the digital side, I joined Supercell 2011. It's a kind of mobile gaming company. I work on there over 10 years on different games. I was in Heyday as a designer, kind of early team, the main designer there. And then in Boom Beach, I was also the main designer. And then I work briefly on a few different kind of more like as prototypes games, but ended up in Brawl Stars. Like we started that with a small team, and I was game lead and game designer initially there. I didn't work there that long, but that's kind of like those are mobile games, and then lots of other stuff on the mobile side there while I was at Supercell. But those would be the biggest games, I guess.
All right. Well, so I know, I got to dig in a little bit into the insides workings of Supercell in a previous episode, although you got in this earlier. But I gotta be honest, I'm really fascinated about this particle physics and theoretical physics background. What one kind of what were you doing? What was life like as a theoretical physicist, and then I'm curious how that kind of translated over into games.
Yeah, so it is very different, I guess. Like I don't know, like I was always very very curious about, and I'm very curious about everything, and I really want to understand how the world works, and it's still super important part of my life and a hobby. So I was just like passionate about that, and I think I've been just always following my passion. Like something gets to my head, and then I just almost like compulsively try to do it and learn it. So physics was kind of the first thing that got me really excited. And then while I was doing the research, I found like the Euro games. I think 2000, yeah, pretty much. I found Catan first, and then Puerto Rico. And after I played those games, I just started thinking about game design all the time and board game design. So it kind of opened the world for me.
Yeah, so this is one of the things. It's kind of a theory I've been developing here. Right, there's a lot of people that are listening that want to know how to sort of turn their passion into a career and follow. And for most people listening, it's game design. But for a lot of people, it's a variety of other things. And I think that there's this common thread between there's this sort of progression from curiosity of something like, oh, I'm interested in this thing, to like a complete obsession, like this thing where you have to like focus in and you just spend many of your waking hours like digging deep into a subject. And it sounds like that's what happened with you here, both to get to theoretical physics, because obviously requires a lot of focus and attention, and then just sort of you followed your curiosity and attention the other way. Is there some kind of trait that you've had your whole life? Is there some practice that you do when you think, oh, hey, this is something I might be interested in, this is what it's like to now become like focused and obsessed on it to get to the highest levels? Because it's not common. A lot of people are interested in how the world works. A lot of people are interested in games, but you've kind of risen up to this professional level in both very diverse fields. So I'm interested to tease out, is there some practice or habit or traits that you possess that brought you in those places?
Yeah, it's introspective. It's super hard to be honest. I don't know. I just, maybe it is some kind of trait that when I get excited about something, it just becomes fun to do and fun to spend time on it. So it doesn't feel like it is somehow very necessarily something I aim towards. Or of course, like it's a combination of work and fun, I guess. But I think the fun and curiosity is really driving. And when you can find that spot which kind of really excites you, I think you get so many things for free. So
right. Yeah, the big difference of like when you're really passionate about something, it's not that there's no work, but it's a lot of the things that other would seem like work don't feel like work. And so there's a huge portion of your time that you just enjoy spending that way. It makes it a lot easier to get the necessary reps to reach a world-class level.
Yeah, and maybe I would add there, like, I think as long as you can keep these things as a hobbies, so they don't become like too important for you, so like your whole life depends on it, that you kind of succeed in this one thing, I think it gives you some room to breathe and really, don't feel like you're pressed against the wall or something like that. So I think like as long as you can keep them, and I really try to still nowadays also keep all my work as like just a kind of fun thing and hobby. And as long as that works, I feel like I'm always in a good spot, and like there's a lot of room for creativity and fun.
Interesting. So I like that frame. So this idea of like don't take yourself too seriously, don't take your work too seriously. And I can understand people can probably relate to that when it's like, hey, I'm just designing games on the side, and I've got a job, I've whatever. But when it becomes your career, it seems a little harder to do. How do you keep that mentality, that kind of fresh, fun mentality when it really is your job, or really is I mean, you're working on games at Supercell where it's billions of dollars on the line overall. Like, how do you keep that same mindset?
I don't know.
It's all right. Not an easy question.
Yeah, not an easy question. But I think like one thing which helps, I don't know if this is a real solution or anything, but like if you have multiple things in your life that you are passionate about, then I think it puts a little bit less pressure on one thing, and it gives you some freedom. So I always like, my problem is actually that I have way too many things I'm interested about, and kind of spread my attention maybe sometimes a bit too thin. But like I think it has a benefit, which is that it like no single thing becomes like this solely like this is the only thing and my life is kind of depending on this one thing. I think that opens a lot of this freedom to not stress about too much. Of course, there's always stress, but like maybe that helps a bit.
Yeah, no, I think, and I don't think the goal is like zero stress or don't care at all, right? I think that the goal is, is to have that right level of tension between this like fun, playful, exploratory, creative mindset, right? And then the, kind of focus. Some amount of stress is actually good, in my opinion, right? You need some amount of this like tension that means you're pushing at your edge, you're trying stuff that's hard, that you're not sure if it's going to work,
that creates this positive tension if you frame it in the right sort of way. At least that's how I kind of feel about it. So I think there's something there of like finding that right edge and having a diverse set of interests that keep you moving forward. I'll just speak to my own experience. Whenever we have like one project that this project is the one that has to succeed or we're doomed, I'm less creative. It's less fun as opposed to like, hey, I'm going to pour everything I can into this project, but there's also another 5 or 6 projects that we're working on at the same time or that I can jump to, which makes it both more fun, more creative, and less stressful if one thing doesn't go the way I would hope. Is it kind of get at what you're talking about?
Yeah, totally. And I feel when I think about kind of aspiring game designers or whatnot, like I feel like there's 2 extremes where you can get stuck. One is that you always kind of start working on a new thing and never finish anything, and you never kind of push yourself to the making the whatever you're doing like complete game or whatnot. And then the other extreme is the fact that you start one project and then you endlessly work on that one project and never give it up and never open a new chapter. So, but I think the balance is the hard thing is to find the right balance, that you have enough projects going on at the same time. You're willing to kill many of those, but then the ones that you feel like you want to push to the end, like you really put time and effort to make the final polish and like really balance it and whatnot, like push it to the very last line. And yeah, I think that's kind of balance. Try to find the right spot. And I think people are in different parts of like different points in the spectrum, and everyone has their own challenges. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's something that requires just a little bit of introspection, right? Are you the kind of person, if you've been doing this for a while, a couple of years, and you've never finished a project, well, okay, probably you need to shift your gears a little bit and be more focused on one thing. Or if you have spent a couple of years and you've only worked on one project, okay, hey, probably you need a little bit more diversification and try some other things. Like kind of finding. I think you're right that different people can kind of have a tendency to err too far in one way or the other, and you need a little self-correction at that point. But you can't know where you are in the spectrum till you just try doing stuff for a while and start to see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I would push people to more beyond the spectrum where you try a lot of things, because like you can learn so fast when you try plenty of things and you fail with them. And I think the problem is that when you get stuck with one project, it takes eternity. Like then you kind of stop learning and developing yourself. So I think people should be trying out more things and failing more often.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key thing you said there, which is that you have to try and fail, which means you have to get your things in front of people, right? So there's plenty of people who will try a bunch of projects, and that means they have scribbles on their own notebooks, or they have their own ideas for stuff, but they don't actually take it to the point where they can really test it and feel the failure, right? So I think that to me, it's like, yes, you should have a lot of projects that get you to that stage and go through the iteration loop a couple times, and then you move to next things, so that because I don't think you learn unless you actually get real feedback from real people that are not just yourself. In my experience, I don't know if you feel differently.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It actually ties into something I was really interested in. It's jumping around a little bit, but I saw some article you did, or like an interview question that you did, talking about how you use kind of mental prototype testing as a very extensive. You'll actually avoid, when you're making a new game, you'll avoid writing down rules or creating any prototypes or anything, and you'll actually play through the game multiple times in your head. This was from a while ago. I don't know if this is still your practice, but I'm a fan of mental playtesting. But it sounds like you're pretty extreme in that space. I'd love to hear your process there.
Yeah, I totally. I like prototyping in your head. I think like that is the metaphor I've been now using. I think it is. Yeah, it's as you can try to, and I think that's like a skill. Like if you think what is a game design skill, I think that's at least very important part of it, because like if you just randomly try out different things, there's a chance that something succeeds. But like if you can keep it in your head and really try to think about how it will play out, see all the possible outcomes and problems, and what could be fun, what could be challenging. Like it helps you tremendously. You can kill many ideas, kill many mechanics or whatnot already there. And that is a skill you can learn. I think more you do it in your head, the better you become at it. And then, of course, what else? Then I think it's a kind of exploring all those opportunities helps and gives you like the great spot where you can start the real playtesting and get the feedback and feedback to your mental model. and only after you enter the like stage where you feel comfortable, I think like that's a good moment to start writing the rules. That type of like thing works for me, but I think like people are also very different on this. So I'm not saying it's the only way. It's just something I've been using, and I really enjoy doing it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to bring out the way different people do things and see where there's commonalities and see where there's differences. And so I find it interesting. I'm a huge fan of mental prototyping. Basically, my philosophy is your prototyping should be as simple and quick and stupid as humanly possible. Like because you just want to get to the point where you can test a thing, and the simplest way to do that is just run it through in your head. You don't have to create any any components. You don't have to do anything other than go through it in your head. I think it's really useful for people to ask some key questions when they're doing this. Like, okay, how am I getting the information that I need? How is the things represented? What are the tough choices I'm making? How am I interacting with other people? Like, there's a lot of things that people gloss over when they're just thinking of a game in high concept, and running through what I would view as a sort of proper mental prototype forces you to like answer those questions. Okay, what is it that I'm not seeing, that I wasn't thinking about, that now all of a sudden I don't have that information if I'm, coming to this game straight, or this new thing, the problem comes up, or this incentive feels wrong. You kind of make yourself feel it. And I agree with you. I think it's just something that comes with practice. And the more you go through the exercise, the better you're going to get at it.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you can also try to do is that when you're doing the mental modeling or mental prototyping, I think you can try to find like what are the weak spots in the game, like what are the question marks, and then you can kind of try to prototype those as fast as possible and get like feedback. So some things might be, I know like worker placement works this way, and you can use this mechanic or whatever you are kind of doing, but maybe there are some parts of the game that you feel less comfortable with, and you are not sure how it will play out. So it can help you also direct your kind of attention to these potential challenges in the game.
Yeah. I like to call those my riskiest assumptions, right? The things that I'm like, okay, this is what I'm hinging the game on, or hinging the concept on.
Yeah.
And how do I test those as quickly and cheaply as possible to figure out like, okay, is this fun? Is this doable? Where am I at? And to be honest, I take the same approach to business. Now I'm jumping. We'll talk about your entrepreneurship journey later, but I find I go through the exact same process, regardless of what aspect I'm working on.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, okay, so you've we go from theoretical physicist to getting hooked on Euro games, and then how did your process transition to professional design?
Yeah, so I was already working on the games while I was doing the research, like on as a side hobby, but it became a kind of obsession, I guess. Then I decided that I want to kind of pursue that a bit more. I was a postdoc at University of Victoria in Canada, but we decided to come back to Finland and with my family, and I started working more seriously on board games, and I also did some teaching on the side for some time, and but it was kind of I think it's also a good like maybe a tip for life, or I don't know, my at least philosophy is that it's good to have these, not bet on one thing, but have a different opportunities maybe that you can like how to say it, like if something doesn't work out, there's a fallback plan. Let's put it this way, right? So, for example, for me, when I stopped being a researcher and wanted to pursue the board game stuff more seriously, like my secondary plan was that, okay, then I could, if this doesn't work out, I can be a teacher primarily and then just work on board games as a kind of side thing. So I kind of pursued both of those at the same time a little bit. But then the board games started working better, and like we around that time I was working on Eclipse, and it looked quite promising, and like things were great, and I spent a lot of time on the board game side. But that kind of then by accident, almost, like my friends asked me to join Supercell, and I joined that pretty much at the same time. But it wasn't like I have only one thing, and I decided that this is the one thing I wanted to do it, but it like my life didn't depend on that at that point.
Yeah, this ties into your earlier note about not making everything depend on your passion hobby, right? Like that, it's like if this fails, I can't eat next week, right, is a very different kind of place. And there's a lot of research that backs this up, that right, when you're in a playful mood, when you're in a less stressed mood, you're more creative, you're more open. And so if you're, your next meal or your rent depends on something, it's going to be harder to stay in that open, playful mindset. So that's certainly helpful. And I think, I just to underscore this too, right, like a lot of people like view, taking a career in game design or entrepreneurship and starting a company, or like, I quit law school to become a game designer, I quit my job as a game designer to start a company. Like those things are quote unquote risky, but like you, I always had fallback plans, right? I could have gone back to law school, I could have gotten another job, I had other tools available. So it wasn't like, it was important for me to have these things succeed, but it wasn't like I couldn't eat next week, if I didn't. And so I think that's just a really important point. But I'm really curious about so you were playing in these board game communities, you were designing games, and then based on the chops you showed designing these tabletop games, that's what got you the invitation to join Supercell. Is that about right?
Well, I think it helped. I don't think mainly I would say like I happened to knew some people at Supercell who I think they trusted me, and they knew I was making board games, and maybe they liked them, but it wasn't, it wasn't so that kind of I applied to a lot of places, and this helped me, but it definitely did help me. I think maybe I wouldn't have gotten the job, but how to say it? I think it was a combination of being in the right place at the right time, and having some track record, and people who trusted me from, like, they knew me, or some people knew me from some time ago. So yeah. Combination of
I think you just you just succinctly said the formula for success, which is have a group of people that you've added value to, that you have relationships that are real, that people trust you, have some skills that you've developed and demonstrated, and be in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
Those three things together, boom, recipe for success.
Yeah.
So I guess then I'll be curious to talk about, I'm going to be honest, I have not played Eclipse. I've heard incredible things. It won a bunch of awards. I know the scale of game that it is, and I'm really interested to, one, learn about that design process and why you think it was so successful, and then kind of use that as a transition, because that is a huge 4X massive game, and then to go from that to working on mobile games and the most classic short form game almost there is, to see what that crossover was like. So you could tackle that in any order you like, but I'm really curious to dig into both sides.
Yeah. Eclipse story I think it started like 2008 or 2008 maybe. So I always loved to play like Civilization, Master of Orion, these kind of strategy games on PC. And then I was always a bit frustrated, like what type of Civilization games were on like a tabletop, like board games, and there's plenty of great games, but it's like a really difficult and impossible genre in many ways, right? But like I think that's the dream, like how to make this perfect Civ game, and that's always been one of my kind of rail games to make a Civilization game. And I actually started the inspiration game after playing Through the Ages, and somehow felt like, oh, I really want to have experience where there is a map and there's maybe there's a better way to do the production than in Through the Ages. So it kind of started from the point of view that I wanted to make a historical Civilization game, and I wanted to kind of improve, I guess. Like I had a new idea how to make the production track to work better than in Through the Ages. And then it was like just a combination of multiple things. I first tried to push for the Civ game, like historical game, but I've hit some. It's difficult to make a historical Civilization game because there's a lot of like a theme that needs to be right, and it didn't feel like right to just lap the theme on it. And so, and the other thing which I've always been, like I said, like really excited is the sci-fi and especially Master of Orion's computer games. So it kind of very naturally transitioned from this historical Civ game to this space Civilization game. And I think things just, I spent a lot of time on it. First on my own, and then I talked with a bunch of people about it, and then I met Sampo Sikia, who who worked with me on the game after that, and he did a lot of the art, but he also helped me with the whole development. Like we just bounced our ideas together and made it better as in many ways. And any questions?
Yeah. Well, so that you hit on the key thing, which I want to dig into, and you can break down. Like I also huge fan of Master Orion, huge fan of the entire Civilization series. We've had talked about that a fair amount on the podcast already. But I think the challenge of taking those games, which are by their nature massive, and they take dozens of hours to play through, they require enormous amounts of kind of processing and things that are going on, and turning it into a board game experience that captures the essence but doesn't overwhelm with complexity and massive just overhead, right? Why am I playing this board game and not just playing Master of Orion or Alpha Centauri or whatever other game? So how did you tackle that problem specifically? You mentioned the Through the Ages resource system. Maybe for people that aren't familiar, you can break that down, or just like a little bit of like how you tackled it mechanically, and how you solved that problem.
So the board games, like I always hate fiddly games, and I guess you can make the case that Eclipse is actually like there's a lot of pieces and components, but I think it's so like I'm a big believer in holistic game design, and whatever it means. On free to play, it means a bit different thing, but on board game side, I think it starts from the components and art and iconography, and then the actual gameplay itself and the theme. So I think like everything needs to fit together. And I really hate when there's a lot of like setup time, and it's kind of you need to reorder the decks and like blah blah blah. So I always want to try to make the games as somehow simple and elegant as possible, starting from all the bookkeeping and whatever production the stuff you need to do. So it was one of the core innovations core ideas for the game to have the production to be as smooth and easy to do, so that you don't spend too much time in this thing that doesn't really help you. There's no like an interesting decision involved. Like it's just a bookkeeping work, and I think it worked quite well. I think it's a big part of the game's maybe success that the core gameplay is works pretty smoothly from that point of view, and you don't need to spend time on it. But I think like other part of definitely keeping the scope as small as possible, but still keep the epicness. I think Civ games just need a lot of different things to make it feel like it's an epic game, but somehow trying to compress that to as little time as possible. I think that was super important personally, and because those are that type of games I like to play. I don't usually have time to play 8-hour games or 10-hour games. I really want to play it in one game night, and that was the goal for the game. And I think that was where I saw some opportunities also, because like a lot of great epic games existed, but they were just like super long and super complicated and super difficult to set up. So it was a big design goal for me to try to compress that somehow.
Yeah, that is key, and it's one of the things that just has come. The older I get, the less time I have for long games. Even though I'll play a lot of games, I can't. I can't commit a 6 to 10 hour session to something anymore.
Yeah.
So, okay, and so then I'm interested then in how you go from taking this game and so what a typical game of Eclipse. How long does it take to play?
It depends. We played a 2-player game in 45 minutes. I think that's kind of where you can, but that's pretty. And I think 4-player game in 1 hour 45 minutes. That's maybe my record personally. But like if you have a group that doesn't know how to play it, and you have 6 players, it can take quite a long time. I don't know, maybe for some groups like 5-6 hours. But I think it's like 3-hour game maybe on average. 2-3.
Okay, all right. So you're going from a still well compressed version of a 4X style game, but many hour experience, to designing for mobile games. And you're at Supercell from very early on, and they've become the dominant force in the space. So what was that process like, or how did the design principles cross over or not as you're designing from many hour tabletop game to multiple minutes, maybe too long mobile game?
Yeah, well, maybe one word about like what I like about board game designs, and just before jumping into that topic, I think like I always like want to explore a different type of game mechanics, audiences, themes. That's kind of somehow it maybe it's driven my curiosity and and like the willingness to learn new stuff and challenge myself from that point of view. So I've done like kids games, I've like, done a puzzle game, I've done a trivia game, I've done yeah, very like Euro games, more heavier games. So I kind of like want to explore the full design spectrum. Um, so it was I felt like it was a new challenge to jump on the mobile space because free to play was kind of new. I guess it has existed for some time, but like it wasn't that well or that much applied yet on a wider scale. And yeah, it's a new device, new platform, new input methods. Touchscreens was quite new at that time. A lot of things to be explored and tried, and it was like a really great place to jump on. And in point of view, like there was so many new things, and there wasn't that much of like uh there were a lot of new things to be explored on the whole kind of platform side, I would say.
So just the fact that it was a new medium, a new arena for designing games was a big draw for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of seeing, how does technology overlap with design, right? As new things come onto play, and that can be, new, printing capacities and components available for physical games, as well as, of course, the more traditional new technologies like touchscreens or virtual reality. Like I've designed for both those spaces, and just hugely different concerns around what you should make and what types of tools you have and what types of barriers you have. So I think that it is fascinating. When we had digital algorithmic printing technology, this helped us create SolidWorks Fusion. It's like things you couldn't have done, even 6 years ago. So it's always fun to play in that space. So what were then maybe kind of dive into that process of exploration and learnings for what makes great mobile games, and how do you approach designing them?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of things like of course the fact that the game is played on a small screen and you're in the whole touchscreen interface is very different. I think that is a very exciting and interesting problem, right? Then there's, I think the business model is definitely a different one. So you are free to play is very, very different from like give some opportunities, but also some challenges for sure. And I think what is tied to that is this kind of endless gameplay, which I feel like as a game designer, it is the biggest difference to regular, let's say, board games, where you have like session you play and the game ends. Of course, you have legacy games nowadays, which a little bit changed this and maybe are a bit closer to free to play endless games. But that is a big paradigm shift and needs like you need to take that into account when designing like never ending free to play games, basically. So they're more like a hobbies, I guess. But it's also super exciting and challenging environment to work. But I like challenges, so it's fun.
Yeah. Well, so this stuff really does fascinate me, because I think it's it sort of plays in the space of not just sort of what does the technology provide, but also what does the business model provide in terms of how design should be approached, right? As when I'm buying a board game, I'm going to pay a certain amount of money, I'm going to get the experience, I want a good experience out of it, and then I can put it away on my shelf and I can bring it out again, and that's fine, right? If I'm playing a free to play mobile game, then I'm the friction to approach it is near zero. But then the question is, what is it that's going to make this make me want to keep coming back? What's it going to make how is it going to pay for itself? They're very expensive to create up front. And what does there's a sort of burden of continuous ongoing content, not totally unlike something I have a lot more familiarity with, which is the trading card game space, right? Where here I'm spending some amount of money up front to play the game, but there's this expectation of continuous content and continuous evolution that needs to be designed and thought of. The way I approach those kinds of games is completely different than how I approach a traditional board game or expandable board game. So how do you think about that in terms of what does the model look like? The business model approach to it affect the design of those games?
Yeah, I think like games are done always in this medium where there's people using the platforms, and I think there's been like this big movement from players that they they are not willing to necessarily to pay. There's so much competition. There's so much different opportunities you can spend time on. So like it's kind of natural evolution, and I think it's coming from the players wanting to not pay, which drives the whole industry towards like having free to play. And I think it adds a lot of like good benefits, but the challenges are related to when people come to the game, they come with the expectation that they haven't invested anything in front, right? So like there's zero money investment, which is very different than when you buy a board game or when you go to the game store and buy some AAA game, right? You have this different mindset when you enter the game. So I think what it affects is that players, it is harder to keep them excited, and you need to be more careful in the beginning, like how you teach the game, how simple it is for them to learn. The early game needs to be super fun and engaging already from the very beginning. And I think that's like one, I would say maybe like a limitation, but challenge definitely. And then of course, like the fact that how do you build a game or system that's always exciting, and there's new content. Or I try to like there's like two different approaches making like these endless games, right? Like one is to just have a content releases, maybe it's like a Candy Crush or whatever. You have always new levels, you update it, and there's new content coming every day. And then there's the other way to think about it, which is that the designers built the systems that always generate random content, or whatever, not necessarily random content, but some perhaps procedurally generated content or whatnot. And or it's a multiplayer game where players are creating the game content for themselves, right, by playing against each other. So that is kind of like a system design. And I think like good and great games, they need a little bit of both. Like there needs to be the right systems in place that make sure that the game just keeps on giving new content, even if you don't need to do any kind of content updates or add new expansions or whatnot. But it's kind of naturally keeping the game fresh. And then also handcrafting some interesting new cool stuff and features and keeping on developing the game. So there's like one big difference to board games or like these boxed games in general is that there's like two phases, I would say, very roughly speaking, with digital development and like never ending games, which is the kind of early production phase and starting from prototyping to releasing the game, and then there's the kind of the live operation phase of the game where it might be even like a different team working on it, and it needs a different expertise to keep the game fresh, build new stuff on top of it. But like building the foundation and then running the game, I think those are very different type of development cycles.
Wow, there was a lot of gold in there, a lot of things to unpack. Right. So the first thing I just want to underscore, which I thought is fascinating, is like because the game is free to play and the barrier to entry is so low, your player investment is also low, and so your the tolerance that they have for complexity of rules or for not getting like instant kind of fun is way lower. So you have to be extra conscious of that. It's like an interesting drawback of free to play. And then kind of just talking there, the building. Of course, core systems that are fun, building systems that auto-generate new content in some form. So there's a consistent stream of content that you don't have to manually generate, and being prepared to generate, manual, interesting content as you go. Those are both like really interesting design considerations to have up front. And so, yeah, for me, the live operation stuff is the thing I'm most interested to dig into because, and early production insofar as how much you're thinking about how much the game can support better live operations. I'll tip my hand here, right? We're building a digital version of Soulforge Fusion right as we speak, and it's a really fascinating problem or challenge because we're taking the physical game that we know and we support and people can scan their decks in and play, and creating a version that people can access and want them to stay engaged with that has its old different set of barriers. So running live operations for a digital game is something that I'd love to dig deeper into and see how that overlays into when you're thinking about this early production design.
I think like when you are building the game, the foundations, like those set some restrictions and opportunities for the live operation, definitely. And I think when you are doing that early development, you need to take that into consideration, definitely. So,
are there any principles that apply there that you say, okay, you've been doing this for whatever 12 years, 10 years, some very extended period of time, that you're like, now you know some tricks of the trade that say, all right, well, listen, your game should need to do X, Y, or Z, or here's a few useful things that can give you more legs when it comes to live operations.
I think like then you need to go a bit deeper to really give, I think, like super solid answers, because different game genres are so different and they need a bit different approach, I would say. That's kind of in general, but like maybe oversimplifying, I think whatever is the core of the game, whatever is the thing that players are most engaged with, like that, that is kind of the heart and core of the game, and you need to somehow build the live operation around that, but also to keep in mind that whatever you are producing is something that you can actually produce, or whatever you offer to the player is something that you can offer with a decent pace and a decent budget, right? Like if you, let's say game is a hero collector where you are playing with some hero which has like a really cool 3D character with a lot of different cosmetic options and like super cool animations and voiceovers and whatnot. It's super expensive and slow to build those things and then balance everything. So if your content pipeline is all about like handing out new heroes every I don't know 2 weeks or something, like it is actually like a real challenge to have that type of pipeline working. So I think you need to be kind of taking that into consideration, like what is something that I can sustainably produce in the long term. There's enough design space, there's enough like actual team size, like those things start to matter. So that is one thing at least which you need to take into account and think about, like what is the right foundation for the game, what is the main content the players are consuming and engage with.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, once you know what that main content is, and then depending upon the scale of what you're building, like how expensive is it to make more of that content as you go, which will dictate kind of what your live operations overhead is, and what scale you need to be at in order to achieve success, right? If it's I'm putting out a new 3-paragraph text story in a choose your own adventure every week, that's one thing, compared to making fully animated new characters that you're encouraged to buy, and they have all their own special powers and balance, and then it's a whole different thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Maybe to add on that, like one more thing, like I think especially in digital games and free-to-play games, like it's good to think in these two aspects. Like you have the core gameplay and then you have the meta gameplay. And the core gameplay is something very atomic. Like you do that, maybe it takes 30 seconds, maybe it takes 5 minutes, maybe it's a 20-minute session. Like and then there's the meta game around it, which is more about like unlocking the content, progression, all of that stuff. So that gives you some like tools how to map and how to balance things. And I think it's easier to work on those games where there's like a very simple core gameplay loop, and then you have like a meta systems around it, and then the balancing that, I think, can be done using, I don't know, formulas and all kind of different balancing tools, I guess.
Yeah, well, so I really want to know more about that part, because so I get it, the core, make a great core gameplay experience. That is true for, doesn't matter what genre of game you're trying to build, that's critical. And in the board game world, people don't expect any kind of meta progression, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's just
legacy games.
Yeah, except legacy games, and that's the sort of odd case. You're just like, hey, that was a great game, cool, I'll play it again later because I really enjoy that game. But in free to play games and in mobile games, I might even go so far as to say it doesn't matter how great your core gameplay experience is, without any meta progression, you're going to lose a lot of people, like massive numbers of people, because the expectation is that you want this meta progression, that there's something like I'm earning or getting by playing, which is kind of bizarre to some extent to me, but it seems to be just the norm and the expectation now. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it is true. Although I must say, I think there are some core gameplays that work surprisingly well without any metagame, like Go or chess, and they have a long tradition of having zero metagame and people still playing. Of course, like actually nowadays, like chess has a little bit of metagame. It's not about progression, but it's only about skill progression and different practice systems around it and stuff like that. But I think super interesting that has evolved to that type of direction, like chess.com and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think what is good with how I like to approach the meta side is that it is a great tool also to pace the learning experience for players. So as we discussed, like very early on, you can't like put that much complexity into a game, especially on free to play game, because like people have zero interest in learning new things. Like they might like to play it when they know the rules and that they know how to master it, and they're learning to master it. That's fun, of course, but like learning new stuff is difficult. So like meta games can be a kind of these progression tools to unlock new interesting content and gameplay with the right pace for the right right players. So it is a good tool in that respect, opening up the complexity and new features for the player.
Yeah. So you mentioned, I want to dig deeper into how you think about building these things. You mentioned that you can use formulas to balance it. How do you approach that? Like how whatever, you can use an example from a game you're working on, or you can think, speak directly to me. And how should I think about, a game that I'm bringing to digital that, doesn't have a meta progression by default, just has you have algorithmic generate decks, you play them. Now we're building something that evolves that way. How do you approach those kinds of problems?
For sure, they are also very game dependent, but maybe I can talk from. It's hard to give any specific advice for you in this project, for example. But in my past,
use your own expansions, your own projects, of course.
that's maybe easier. So my background is in math and physics, right? So I think I've been able to leverage that type of thinking in I think in board games to some extent, but especially on digital games, because whenever players are, I think the challenge is that players are playing a game for years, maybe even like 10 years, right? And there's no way you can really play it yourself fully and explore everything. And different players are playing with different pacings, and some are super engaged, some are playing every now and then, and somehow the game should be a great experience for everyone. So, and it actually becomes even more complicated because some players are wanting to use money and move faster in the game, perhaps, and like there's a lot of different paths players can take. And it's impossible to just balance them out by playing yourself. So I think in heart, I feel like I'm a system designer. So like I want to create systems that I know I can somehow control. Not fully, of course, but like there are these. There are systems in planes which I have some intuitive feeling like how they will scale. Usually I use formulas like with few parameters, and whether it's about like how much you get coins. Like let's say in Heyday, it's a farming game where you when you are growing crops and baking bread, and it's like Agricola, I guess, right? So and then you're kind of fulfilling these orders and getting money, and then there's some XP, and you play it for years, and you kind of go through the whole loop of filling these orders and getting resources. And so like thinking about like money production, how much new things should cost, how things are tied together, like basically it is few formulas, some logic, how things are work. And once you have those few building blocks, right, then you can you have like an intuitive feeling how the system will work. And there's few parameters. Maybe it's how much coins each atom of the economy will produce, and you can tweak that number. Maybe there's a different exponential curve for certain things. They scale. It's controlled by one parameter. When you change the exponent, like the whole journey for the player will change a certain way. And now you have like some tools to understand and manage and tweak the progression. And then you can, it's a combination of having those fundamental systems in place with like few controllable parameters. Then you have some Excel spreadsheets that you use to map things out. Maybe you even run a simulator, like we did that in a few of our projects, where we basically just run an AI playing the game, or then some, I don't know, Python script or something. It can be different things to just map like different player journeys and see how much, let's say in Heyday example, like if they play the game for some years, like or a few months, like what's their coin balance, right? And then you can use that to tweak the curve, and or maybe you can even do that calculation in Excel and use that to tweak the curves to yourself. So and then there's a player, like you playing the game or the players playing the game, then finally getting real data from the players. You can use all of those as an input to again go back and tweak those few parameters in your spreadsheets. And I think it's kind of this iterative process, but it all starts from having these good fundamentals on the system side that you can control and understand.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. So I think that kind of being able to map out these progressions and making sure I heard it correct. Where so I'll know, the formulas of, okay, I can adjust. Let's assume somebody's playing for an hour a day for 6 months. I can see how much they would have earned going through these normal systems and make some assumptions around different ways they could be spending their currencies and see what happens. And then I could tweak that and say, okay, well, what about this player profile that's going to spend $100 and see how they would progress and how much they compare. And you could be able to kind of contrast and get a feel for like, what does it feel like to be a free to play player? What does it feel like to be a paid player? And how does that extend out over months, years, whatever? Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yes, I think like perhaps there's a a bit deeper level, which is coming from the fact like what is the foundation, like what are the system designs, like principles. Usually, like you try to, at least I try to come up with as simple and as simple core principles as possible, which I can intuitively understand. So I don't necessarily even need. It's kind of like a little bit tied to the prototyping in your head, the idea. So you want to create this model that you understand, and that's actually something I've found. It's a bit hard to try to. I like collaborating with other designers and people and stuff like that. But I think these parts like this, if you really want to build a system that you understand, I think if you start handing out pieces of that to different designers in your team, for example, it becomes really difficult for you anymore to deeply understand how the game and the systems behind it will work. So, having this intuitive understanding of the things is possible only if you make like good enough principles on the very fundamental level. Like, for example, like maybe each dollar is mapped to a time equivalent, and that time equivalent and the systems there are in place are such that you don't need to think about every player progression individually. You have these fundamental principles will map each to each other, and that will help you to understand whatever players will do in this system, it's going to be okay because of these fundamental decisions made in the game that will always make sure that the players can't kind of destroy the experience because of these principles.
Interesting. Okay, so that's a good. Do you have other examples that come to mind of that? These kinds of general principles one could apply to a meta progression that are understandable and can help make otherwise complex things simple.
I think it is just like every design principle, keeping it as simple as possible, but yet having enough complexity or depth to really make
this is
sure.
This is like the Einstein quote. Everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler,
exactly.
Something like that. Yeah.
I think that is the trick with everything, right?
Yeah.
But like there's
you see this is your theoretical physics coming in here. This is the principles you've learned from there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there's like tendency to fix things and improve things by creating exceptions, and we know as a game designers, all of us, that it's a bad. You should try to avoid it. But I think that is somehow easy to do when easy to land on this trap that you just overcomplicate your economy with all kind of different handcrafted rules and just use very good principles and formulas, and that will help a lot with few parameters. And I think that's kind of the main key how I at least try to approach. And then maybe the other thing is to try to use this somehow like these procedurally generated systems inside your thing, whatever it is. You can create like a lot of these variations and different experiences by combining in a clever way, bits and pieces, and having a great systems in place which make sure that players will get fresh experiences. You need very few building blocks, very few rules in that.
Yeah. Having systems that can create content endlessly does feel super valuable. And again, obviously, I'm speaking from working on an algorithmically generated game where there's a literal infinite number of deck permutations that you could have. So it's a wonderful tool to have available. And we're trying to build the same thing into like at the heart of what we're doing to have different kinds of content that can come in the game as well. So that definitely resonates. Are there heuristics that also can, in the spirit of simplification, that can also work in this favor? Like, you said, hey, $1 matched to a time equivalent. Is there like a standard range? Hey, every dollar is worth an hour of time or a day of time, or does it, because I've seen different metrics there, or is it, is there a certain amount of, time you want to be like stopping people from playing. I see a lot of these games where they try to get you to come back every 8 hours. I don't know if those are just like, kind of cargo culted tropes that people have, or if there's real principles behind them that you think that to apply.
Yeah, I don't think there's any like rule book that you should use this and these values with this and this time. But of course, you build some intuition, but I think every game is actually different, and perhaps some people just fall back too easily to replicate other games or the decision, which I feel sometimes they're a bit arbitrary in the beginning, but then someone does something and then just people copy it, so it kind of becomes something that's used just see over and over.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I try to avoid here, especially when I move. It's the temptation. I built up enough of my design instincts and tabletop games and card games and things like I can. But when I move to a new arena, like again, an area I don't have as much experience in, like building these progression mechanics, the tendency, and I'm sure this is true for people listening for this. Hey, what have other people done? Let me just copy that, which is a totally reasonable place to start, but it can often lead to this kind of groupthink trap that you're actually missing the core principles underneath it, like what's really important here. So that's the kind of stuff I always like to draw out. So when you make decisions, they're based on first principles, not on just copying what's out there.
Yep, totally.
Okay, so speaking of first principles, I want to make sure to now get into this new company you've had for, I think, less than a year. You've been public, if I recall correctly. So talk to me about the transition. What made you leave Supercell and start this company? Tell me about what it's about and what you're up to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so the new studio we are running is called Stellar Core. We are doing mobile games in Helsinki. We are actually part of this Brazilian company called Wildlife, and I think it's a really exciting and interesting setup where the studios have like a full creative freedom, and they can do their own decisions, like they want, kind of explore whatever games they want and make the calls. But then there's also like this support organization which helps us in many ways in kind of publishing and it is super complicated nowadays to make successful mobile games. I would say it needs so many different things to come together, like starting from great marketing but there's also like support, legal, whatever, but then actual like a lot of the core thing is making the game itself. So I think it is difficult to build a studio which is small and it's kind of very development focused, and then yet able to support all of the stuff that's needed around it. So I think this is like a great model where we can be like a creative studio focusing on games, and we have only developers in our team, like 15 people at the moment. We are working on two new games, yet we can tap into this bigger structure that will help us to distribute the games.
Yeah. And so was the process like you knew you wanted to do something on your own and you approached them for funding to start building it, or you had something you broke off and you were building and then you connected with them? Like, I'm always curious how these deals come together.
Yeah. It is like I spent over 10 years at Supercell and I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great company and I was happy there. Of course, like, when you do one thing for a long time, maybe there's things that you want to explore new things and learn new things, try new things. And it's a big company, right? Like Supercell is really big. The bar to make new games is super high. It creates some pressure, right? Not, I think in a good way, but also sometimes, of course, like if you have that environment, it's sometimes hard to explore new things. And so I kind of, there's a little bit of that where I wanted to try something a bit smaller scale, perhaps not from the success point of view. Of course, it's great to try to be as successful as possible, but somehow it is easy to do in a smaller team. And
well, yeah, your definition of success is different, right? With Supercell, it has to make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, or it's a failure. But as a small team, a few $1 million a year, $10 million a year, that's not a bad place to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is true. But of course, our ambition is very high here, and But I think it's just like a very natural transition to try something else, start something new. But so let's see how this works. But so far it's been awesome and really enjoyed it. And I think we have cool games in the pipeline.
So I understand the motivation. I'm just, if you don't mind talking about it, I'm just curious about the process, right? So how did you get? You've got what sounds like it makes a lot of sense. It's a great situation where you've got another overarching company that's sort of serving as a publisher and helping fund and manage all the back office stuff and marketing and everything, and is kind of helping you be a primary creative. And of course, you have a great reputation and tons of experience. So what was the process of getting that deal and building the infrastructure for your company like?
Yeah, so they did approach me about this. I hadn't heard about the whole model, but then they explained it to me, and it sounded really exciting. First, I was very reluctant to leave because Supercell, as I said, it's an awesome place, and I really enjoyed my time there. But at the same time, I started thinking about it and made the decision at some point to jump on this opportunity. But yeah, they approached me, and then they told me about it, and I felt it was the right way to build things, and felt like the right decision.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, what a great jump. So then, for what has been the most surprising thing about this transition from jumping and starting a new studio? Obviously, there's going to be a bunch of new challenges that come in. What's been the most surprising thing so far?
I don't know what would be the most surprise. I think maybe the surprise is that things have gone so smoothly, or in a sense that there's always these unknowns, right? And I'd like to think I'm this paranoid optimist, so which means that I'm always paranoid about everything, but I'm also optimistically want to make the best decisions, and whatever. Not once you map out all the risks, then you just commit to the most optimistic outcome, I guess, in a sense. But so I would, of course, had a lot of fears and stresses about how things could go wrong. It's hard to build a team. It's maybe the cooperation doesn't work. There's tons of things. But maybe the biggest surprise is that everything has been very smooth from that point of view. We got a great team super fast, and yeah, I don't think it sounds a bit boring, but I don't think there has been that much big surprises.
That's fine. So, what can you tell us about? I don't know. Assuming you're still, you haven't talked about your projects yet. So, if you can talk about the projects you're working on, or what the philosophy is behind them, or go ahead.
I can talk about the philosophy of our studio, which is that I still want to believe that there is some kind of. So the market in mobile at the moment, it's very tough. I would say it is very tough to find the distribution and get people excited about new games. So that is the kind of reality. But I'm a big believer that when you do something new and cool, which really excites people, that is you can kind of unlock a lot of players and eyeballs and so forth. So our studio is not really a genre specific or we do only these type of games. We want to explore different type of opportunities and try something a bit new. Of course, it's always a combination of taking something that works but then also finding something unique, cool, which hasn't been maybe untapped. So we are really trying to explore new mechanics and ideas. Of course, at the same time, understanding what are the opportunities and constraints in the market. So trying to find the sweet spot between innovation and best practices, I guess.
Yeah, well, that does feel like a good recipe. And so, like I said, I think I've only seen public information about your company for the last 8 months or so. How long have you been working, and how long do you think it will take until you have something that you can actually reveal to the public?
Yeah. So we are working on two games at the parallel. And we are testing. So I want to really test things as fast as possible to get some reads on them, and do smaller testing rounds with first limited player testing. There's a great testing platform like Playtest Cloud and things like that, where you can actually just send the builds to players and get their feedback, see the videos, and test other services as well. But then going in some smaller countries to test few of the games, and this is something we want to do early. But yeah, I can't promise any dates. I think so. We've done some testing for both of the games already, and but I don't know when they will go. We will launch them actually.
So yeah, I want to get into the specifics here, because I think this is actually really interesting and useful stuff, right? So you have a big scale game like this, you can't just release it and talk about it openly. So I've heard about the concept of, you do test launches to countries, but the specifically being able to do these sort of individual test platforms. I'm familiar with like usertesting.com. You said Player Test Cloud. Is that one you prefer? And
Latest cloud. That's something we've been using.
Playtest Cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit to people who may not be familiar with what that is like?
Yeah. Certainly. Yeah. I think there's like, if talking about context free to play mobile games, for example, like there's of course like different phases for testing. I would say like there's the prototyping phase where you just test in your team. Then maybe there's like a company studio playtesting phase where you play with the whole studio. But you can also overlap and sometimes do it even earlier, like to test with certain people around the globe who have signed to these services like Playtest Cloud. So they have like a bunch of people in the ready there, and then you just send your builds, and then they will record a video playthrough where they play the build and give some rating and feedback. That can be really useful. Of course, it's not like real audience, right? They are kind of paid to do that, so it might also give you some wrong impressions, but I think it's very valuable to get that type of feedback where you see players playing it and like oh no, they didn't understand this, or they're really confused about not finding this button or whatnot, like, or they don't really understand anything about it at all in this game. So you get like this surprising feedback when it's kind of like a blind testing with board games, right? Like it provides you a different type of information that you can't get by just giving the game to your friends and who are sitting next to you and you explain it to them. It's
I have. There is nothing more useful and more painful than these kinds of blind play tests.
Yes.
So, just to give people a picture of it, because I've done this with a few of our products where you have with these tests, they'll have somebody will play your game. They're just given whatever instructions you choose to give them. There's a video camera on them. You can kind of see, sometimes there's heat maps of like what they're doing, where they're clicking, and you can just watch them just completely fail to understand these super obvious things that for sure they should have gotten, but in reality means your game's too complicated. You didn't make it clearly enough because you just have all these preconceived assumptions in your own head that are not obvious to other people. So you get to learn that through these blind play tests.
Yes. Yeah, and maybe to add on that, like maybe after you've done some of these type of testing, then there's like these different type of like soft launches or alpha launches. There's a different naming convention. For example, we use like alpha launch and beta launch. Some use soft launch, and then there's a global launch. I think it is some. Of course, it's a bit arbitrary how you define them. There's closed alphas, open alphas, but the basic idea is that you actually submit to some kind of app store or Google Play, and then people in fact, for example, on Android in specific country can find the game, and maybe you do like a small marketing push in that country. You get some hundreds of or thousands of players installing the game. You get some real user data. Mostly like we do typically follow the retention number, which means that if like 100 players join today, then we measure like how many of those players come tomorrow. And that's called like a D1 retention or like day one retention basically. But you can do like the same thing for different metrics, but you get some like a real user data, which helps you maybe to make some decisions.
Yeah, it's there's no substitute for actual user data, and so being able to have these test markets, I know, is super valuable. So in your setup with this with the broader company, are you responsible for those pieces, or is that something that Wildlife Studios, the broader publisher, does those tests, or some combination thereof?
It's a combination. They help us, but we have one data scientist in our team as well. So we do some like but they are providing like a lot of the like backend structure and like help with that pipeline, right? But like we do have our own data scientist. But of course, I think like nowadays the game team needs to understand that type of thinking a little bit. It is part of the puzzle to understand and read the data. I don't think it's the most important thing, but it is an important one for sure.
What advice would you have for people for whom that idea is pretty foreign to them now, right? They understand playtesting, they understand core design loops, but this idea of being able to kind of do these tests and read the data, they don't have you have more than a decade of experience doing this. Where should people start if this is something they're interested in learning more about or approaching?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of books and I don't know, blogs writing about it. You can find a lot of stuff. I think the retention is the most important metric. I think it's kind of more like you can think it as an extra tool that you can do on more on digital space, which you can't really do on a board game physical side. So it is, and it can be really powerful because it can help you to understand, hey, we shouldn't waste time on this project. We should rather work on something else. But I would just go online and find stuff. There's plenty of things.
When you say, and I've heard this before, we've had other guests say the same thing, retention is the most important metric. What is the sense of if people know if their retention is good, bad, or worth pursuing?
That depends so much on genre and platform and audience. So it's hard to give any real benchmark numbers, right? So I think certain type of games, just if it's a very simple casual game, you can have a retention that is maybe like 50-60%. So if you have 100 people, and that's like, let's say US iOS, something like that, that's good retention.
56% for what? How long?
Day one. So if you have 100 users coming today, like it would mean that 50 to 60 of those will open the app the next day or open the game next day.
And how does that scale as you move to less casual games, more engaged games?
Yeah, again, like for some countries, for example, like Android users, let's say they have a lower tier devices. Like there's a bunch of factors which makes it impossible to say one number. But like, I don't know. I don't know if I even dare to say, but like, I think it's some games, genres like strategy games, maybe they can have like 30, 40. That's still, some games can be successful with those metrics. But of course, then you might need like a really good long-term retention and good monetization to really get users.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the difficulty of picking numbers here. That there's it all interweave. So I like to push to make things concrete because I think for a lot of people this stuff is just so out there. So just like kind of getting some sense is helpful. But great. Well, you've done a lot to really illustrate a lot of great principles from a wide range of subjects here. So I very much appreciate it. I know we're getting a little close on time, so I want to both give you an opportunity to say kind of where people want to follow your stuff or see your new projects or anything like that. Let us know there, or if there's any other things you wanted to make sure we covered or talked about before signing off for today.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have like very little presence on internet. I've been thinking maybe I should do something about it, but like, I don't have any. Like, of course, you can follow Stellar Core and see when our new games come out, and hopefully, I'm also working on some board game stuff. So hopefully. At least Eclipse expansions, but I've also come back to the Civ game idea a few times, and this summer I spent some time on the historical Civ game, but let's see. So those are more like a hobby projects from that side. But yeah, nothing on top of that. Maybe I should start a channel or something, but I haven't done it.
That's okay. It's not for everybody, and it also is it's nice, but it's also a huge distraction of time. I know everybody's like, oh, well, you should do a TikTok or do a whatever. Have another thing. I'm like, I don't know, man. We'll see. But I really enjoy these kinds of conversations. So this is a great piece of content. I'm glad to let people get to know you better, and I get to learn a lot more. So I've really enjoyed it, and I appreciate your time. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you. It was great.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you want to support the podcast, please rate, comment, and share on your favorite podcast platforms, such as iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever device you're listening on. Listener reviews and shares make a huge difference and help us grow this community, and will allow me to bring more amazing guests and insights to you. I've taken the insights from these interviews, along with my 20 years of experience in the game industry, and compressed it all into a book with the same title as this podcast, Think Like a Game Designer. In it, I give step-by-step instructions on how to apply the lessons from these great designers and bring your own games to life. If you think you might be interested, you can check out the book at thinklikeagamedesigner.com or wherever fine books are sold.